Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or seeking to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as clinical psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. It's our last day talking about defense mechanisms, or you know what? I think we'll probably end up coming back and talking about defense mechanisms another day too. But today's the last one for this week on defense mechanisms, and today we're going to talk about rationalization.
One of my favorites.
I like rationalization because, again, I think you mentioned it in the previous podcast. It is something that we have all absolutely done.
We're all guilty of.
You know, this is when you have been accused of something, or there's something going wrong, or some problem, some emotional thing that you don't want to deal with, and you rationalize it.
Yeah, this is really a classic example of a self-defense mechanism, where, you know, something happens, some decision is made, and you just come up with every possible explanation, except the right one,
and remember,
to cover it.
And remember, defense mechanisms are things that we use to protect ourselves, to help shield us from psychological damage, from emotional damage, from dealing with emotional things in life or problems in life that could potentially cause us some issues, some challenges, some things that we don't want to think about with ourselves. Right?
That's right. Especially, that's right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Give us a minute.
Well, so rationalization, as we said, is this idea of finding reasons to explain why that really detract or steer away from the actual problem. You know, and we've seen this in lots of different ways, in lots of different areas. For example, one of the things that we have the opportunity to do here is we see a lot of children and families here in the practice, and you know, we see parents who make some bad decisions as it relates to how they manage their child, how they parent their child, and decisions that they make regarding discipline and consequences and things like that. And invariably, what will happen at times is that the parent will say, "Yeah, you know, he got in trouble the other day, and I had to spank him." And we say, "Well, we talked last time that, you know, spanking isn't going to be the best way to manage that. So you need to, you know, usually we spank out of anger." And they'll say, "Well, I wouldn't have done it, but you know, he was doing this, and because he was doing this, then you know, I had to respond." And so we're rationalizing. It's almost like projection, saying that it's the kid's fault, but it's different because it's using the. It's not saying, "Oh no, the kid did it. I didn't do it. The kid did it." What's happening is we're using the child's behavior to sort of justify what we did, our decisions and our choices, and that's where there's really a problem.
That's right. You do something that you know you're not supposed to do. In this case, the case you mentioned, you've agreed that you won't spank the child. So the child's 7 or 8 years old. We don't. Spanking should be, if you're going to spank, do it before age 5. You should be finished with spanking by then. So this child's 7 or 8 years old, and the parents have agreed not to spank, but suddenly they return to spanking because they're frustrated. And they rationalize their decision to spank by using all other means that they can. They blame the child. They blame, "I was tired. I was out of patience. The child was doing this. The child was doing that."
The other things we talked about don't work. You know, timeout. I tried timeout and it didn't work, I had to.
So you rationalize your behavior by blaming somebody or something else.
And again, it's sort of a justification for your actions. And so we see this very, very often in relationships, and again in parent-child relationships, in teacher-child relationships, or teacher-student relationships, in boss-employee relationships. And so this defense mechanism of rationalization, again, as always, there's some positive aspects of it and some negative aspects of it.
That's right.
So when we think about some of the positive aspects, of course, there are many times when we have to deal with the issue of cause and effect. There are absolutely times when somebody does something that causes something else to happen.
Right. And if you want to protect yourself, like there are times when you have made a mistake. If you're a parent, if you're a partner, if you're a teacher, if you're an employer or an employee, there are times when you make mistakes. And sometimes it's better for your mental health to say, I was tired, I was overextended, and I made a mistake. Okay? And you rationalize your behavior, and so you protect yourself emotionally.
Right.
All right. There are other times, though, when you have to admit, and the rationalization gets in the way of admitting that you've done something untoward or something that you shouldn't have done.
Right. Now, so when we rationalize in an appropriate at an appropriate and healthy time, we're again talking about things that where there was a clear cause and effect. I think about times like my son is now taller than I am, and he likes to wrestle around sometimes and things like that. And there'll be times when we're messing and playing around, and one of us will accidentally hit the other a little harder than we were thinking, or
accidentally.
Yeah, and it's accident. And you can say, well, I didn't mean to do that. When you were doing that, I kind of had a reflex, and so you're rationalizing it, you're justifying the behavior, but it's because that's sort of the reality of it.
Right.
And so it's okay to use rationalization as a defense when again it's really based in a sort of a cause and effect type of situation or scenario. When we get to the unhealthy end, however, what we're talking about is again, I think to me it very much so relates in a lot of ways to projection, where you're deferring it away from you and justifying it based upon somebody else's actions, or you're trying to justify it by coming up with other reasons why, or other excuses why you did something or why something happened.
It's something we see frequently in teenagers, where we get into parent-teen squabbles.
Right.
And the teenager will say, well, she made me do it. If my mother hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have had to do this. I've had teenagers come into the office and say, well, if she hadn't made me angry, I wouldn't have had to hit her.
Right.
I mean, that's classic rationalization.
Right. Right. Yeah, I have a couple of kids that I work with, teenagers that I work with, who will curse at their parents.
Right.
And they'll say, well, they say those words, so why can't I say those words?
And they made me angry.
Yeah. I got mad when they're mad, they say those words. So when I'm mad, I can say those words. And so we're rationalizing, and we're not dealing with the issue of, okay, why is everybody getting so mad? And why are we handling our anger in such unhealthy ways?
Right.
That's what we really need to be talking about.
That's right.
So when we rationalize in this unhealthy way, we're again not really dealing with the root issue that's causing the problem in the first place.
Exactly. Right.
And it allows issues to perpetuate. And I think that if we kind of review all of the defense mechanisms from all week, the main consequence of all of this is we end up allowing problems, allowing issues, allowing hurt to maintain. And because we never deal with the underlying root cause of them.
That's right.
And so it just continues to fester, and it will show up at times when we don't expect it, don't want it to, and it will create more problems in the future.
That's right. Because with each of these defense mechanisms, we know that it serves a useful purpose because it does protect us emotionally, so that we're not too hard on ourselves. At the same time, if we rely on the defense mechanism, we miss the real problem.
Right.
And we don't want to avoid coming to terms with the real problem because we want to continue to improve.
Right.
And if we rationalize, if we use these defense mechanisms as a way of avoiding the real problem, how do you improve? How do you get better?
Absolutely.
And, you continue arguing, you continue fighting, you continue drinking. So you have to come to terms with it.
Right. And so if you find yourself using any of these defense mechanisms, and there's some websites you can go to and you can find up to 30 something defense mechanisms,
20 or 30 of them
where you look. if you find yourself repeatedly using them, or maybe your significant other or your loved one or friend is using a lot of these defense mechanisms, it may be important to, again, when everybody's calm and collected and everything, sit down and have a conversation about it so that you can figure out why it is that we tend to, or that you guys are managing it this way. And then, find ways to cope with the problems and cope with the issues so that you can deal with it in a healthier way.
Find ways to solve your problems. Know that these defense mechanisms are at work, especially in your relationships, but find ways to solve your problems. Know that they're there, and then they can get in the way, and then what you should do about it.
Right, right, absolutely.
Come to terms with the real problem. Spend some time.
Yeah. Don't let it go and just, use these defense mechanisms unhealthily.
Right.
Unhealthily. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is it for today. Hopefully, some of these discussions helped you out. Especially if you find yourself either using these defense mechanisms or that you have someone important in your life that's using these defense mechanisms. Finding ways to help cope with them is going to be really important. So
and if you have children, teach your children about defense mechanisms so that they know that they're using them and educate them. We say in our books, teach, don't punish. Rather than punish your children for using defense mechanisms, teach them about defense mechanisms, especially teenagers. They're completely capable of understanding these and the role that they play.
Yeah.
And that would be an important thing for you to teach them about defense mechanisms.
And I think that it's easy. It's easier to do than you might think, because you're going to, if you're talking with your kid and he becomes, defensive, and he starts to, use projection or rationalization or something like that, you can say, all right, I can see that you're really upset now because we're having, we can't talk about this right now. So let's calm down. Let's come back and talk about it later. You're getting really defensive. Let's come back and talk about it later when we can sit down calmly and discuss it. You're teaching your child then that A, they're using a defense mechanism. B, that using a defense mechanism is okay at times, but C, we still have to deal with the problem.
Exactly.
Before we, instead of just ignoring it, or instead of getting angry with your kid for getting defensive. We all get defensive. And so instead of getting angry with your kid about it or with your partner about it, recognize it, acknowledge it, and say, clearly this is a tough subject. You're getting defensive. So let's talk about it later.
Right. No, it's a wonderful teaching opportunity.
Absolutely.
Especially for teenagers, because they will use these.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is it. Thanks so much for listening. If you get a chance to jump on iTunes or any, YouTube or any of the places that you might find the podcast, make sure you subscribe, leave us a note, rate us, do a review, or any of that stuff would be cool. That would be fantastic if you did that stuff.
Right.
So
we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So until next time, I'm Dr. Berney.
Dr. Richard.
Stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.